Hello and welcome to CII's webinar, I2PD, a means to plan and execute capital projects as part of a COVID-19 economic response. We appreciate you taking the time to join us. This webinar is a hybrid. It presents a current research topic as well as being applicable to the COVID-19 situation. Some general information about our webinar. This is being recorded, so we'll keep everybody on mute. The material will be available on our blog page, which is www.construction-institute.org/blog. On your control panel, you'll see a section called Questions. Please feel free to enter your questions there and we'll address them as we go or at the end of the webinar. I'm Mike Pappas, CII's Associate Director for Deployment. With us today, we have Michael Dubreuil from PTAG, Allison Bradley from Ontario Power Generation, and Dr. Phil Barutha from the University of Nebraska. I'll turn it over to you and let you introduce yourselves.
Thanks, Mike. It's Michael Dubreuil here. I'm the managing partner here at PTAG. I've been in the project world for over 40 years, and I have the distinct honor of having been involved in the development of I2PD, going back to the initial business question that we asked ourselves in a CII board meeting back in the fall of 2016, where we said, how can we increase the success rates of industrial projects? And today we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about how that's going to apply to some of the stimulus funding coming out of the COVID-19 back to work programs that are being launched around the world.
Okay. Hi, I'm Allison Bradley, and I work for Ontario Power Generation. I'm a director for asset and project management in Eastern operations, so in the hydroelectric side of our business. And I was given the opportunity to work on a project at Otto Holden for overhauls of our turbine and generator and using the I2PD method. So I'll be talking a little bit about that further on in the presentation. Phil?
Yeah, thanks, Allison. I'm Phil Barutha. I am an assistant professor in the construction programs at University of Nebraska here in Lincoln. I too had the honor of working on phase one fundamental research, investigating integrated project delivery for industrial projects or industrial integrated project delivery. We presented our findings in 2018, our phase one findings in 2018 at the annual conference, and now we're taking the next step and working on phase two, which is testing those findings on real life I2PD projects in the industrial sector. Thank you. Michael, to you.
Oh, thanks, Phil. If you can go to the next slide. Okay, so the bulk of what we're going to talk about today is that fourth bullet down. What is I2PD as a project delivery method? And in particular, Allison is going to talk about how we've applied it to the Otto Holden project and where we're at with that and the success we've had with that. Just before we get there, I'm going to set the situation up. It goes back to the opening statement on our main slide that says, how can we use I2PD as a delivery method for the economic recovery that governments around the world are in the mid of launching as the COVID-19 shutdowns are wrapping up and governments are looking to relaunch and recover their economies. So with that, if we can go to the next slide. No matter what you read, where you read it, whether it's in your personal life, the life of family members, friends, or within your business, we've all seen the economic impact, not just the health impact of COVID. The economic impact has been devastating to many people and many economies. And so lots of studies out there. We picked a few to talk about. In particular, the global economy is projected to contract by 3.8%, which is up from the original forecast in April. massive amounts of monetary loss driven by 6 months of travel bans. That's probably a good thing because we're all learning a new way to talk to each other. And just sharp drops in demand as industries stop, projects have stopped, retail shopping have stopped. So many small businesses have been impacted and are not able to open up or are just now opening up. On a global basis, it looks like the GDP for the US is projected to be 5% loss. And where the rubber really hits the road is in unemployment. If you just take a look at that top right-hand graph, unemployment in the US was steady, roughly around 3%. Jumped a little bit in March as COVID started to have impact, and you can see the results in April, May, and June there on the chart. The good news is July and August, from a US perspective, have continued to see people back to work. And I think the US economy is now running at something under 10%, just under 10% in terms of overall unemployment. Unemployment didn't affect various industries evenly. And as this chart shows, and I apologize for the blurring of the words at the bottom, but different industries have been impacted differently. And this data is as of April. So leisure and travel and hospitals, biggest impact. Retail, you can see at 17%. Construction, almost 17%, and then as of April, that 14.4% unemployment. And so the goal for most economies, not just the U.S. economies, but for most countries around the world, and to the various business leaders that I speak with in major economies, is to get people back to work, to get businesses back to work. And we're all looking to work with local and regional governments to help stimulate that. So from a Construction Industry Institute point of view, as we were doing this research for I2PD, we thought about how we could use the lessons that we've learned in I2PD and how that might apply to getting projects up and running and being executed quicker, faster, and with more certainty. So the next slide, please. If you look historically, infrastructure investment has been a great way of stimulating economies. One of the strengths is it's quick, or can be quick. And if you do it right, it can have long-term benefits. Some of the challenges, not just in the US, but around the world, is infrastructure as a whole takes a while, particularly with the regulatory requirements we have now to be able to get a project launched, even if it's shovel ready. Getting through the regulatory requirements is a bit of a challenge. But the world's changed. We have some opportunities. We've got new tools available to us, from data-driven approaches to looking at how we get projects up and running and planned and ready to go. New technologies, whether it be drones or laser scanning, or a combination of drones and laser scanning. We can take a look at aging infrastructure quickly with very little impact to ongoing operations. And then, as we've seen around the world, governments prepared to do what they need to do from a monetary point of view. Their policies are such that access to the capital necessary to keep the economy afloat and to launch these projects has never been better. And so right now, investing in the infrastructure, and we think the industrial sectors, is the best approach to helping government to stimulate the economies and get us back to work. Next slide, please. So back in the Great Depression in the US, and for that matter around the world, a variety of good examples of how this infrastructure worked. One of CII's members, TVA, was born out of such a response. Dams such as the Fontana Dam, the Norris Dam, Wilson Dam are generating hydroelectric power. TVA still operates today and provides clean, reliable power to their part of the US. Projects such as the Hoover Dam, the George Washington Bridge, and the San Francisco Mint were all built by the Public Works Administration that grew out of the Depression. And then, interesting projects like the Griffith Observatory or the LaGuardia Airport. The original LaGuardia Airport, and I think we're on version 3 now, as it's just been rebuilt again, were all launched out of the Works Progress Administration in 1939. All good examples that tell us and let us know that this type of investment works in stimulating economies and providing ongoing long-term benefit. Next slide. Other examples, more recent that most of us will remember, is the financial crisis of 2007, 2008. Various economies around the world reacted to the liquidity crisis that came out of the economic meltdown. So we've 3 examples here. South Korea, $13 billion US stimulus package to keep their economy driving, and while the financial sector sorted itself out. $13 billion stimulus bill for new infrastructure and as a repair of existing infrastructure. It seemed a lot back then, but based on the results of that, we can see in Canada that it just wasn't enough to keep up with what was needed. So more is needed. And then again in the US, $105 billion worth of investment, again, dedicated to improving infrastructure. We learned some lessons. Putting the money aside was the easy part. Getting projects ready, getting them planned, designed, and ready for execution and through the regulatory process proved harder than was thought by industry and government. And we learned those lessons coming out of 2008. So next slide. So currently, various economies around the world are looking to stimulate and restart their economies. Right now in the US, there's a debate going on in terms of what that looks like. And unfortunately, the challenge in the US is you're in the middle of an election, so we may not see something until after the election that comes out, but I don't think there's any doubt that there will be stimulus money coming that will be applied to infrastructure and hopefully the industrial sector to get more and more people back to work and get our economies back on the road. Next slide. In Canada, not only do we have a federal government response, but we also have a province by province response. What I've highlighted here is one in particular, the province of Alberta. It's $10 billion investment in infrastructure, maintenance of existing infrastructure and renewal projects, everything from schools, hospitals, and upgrading and twinning of key roads is going on. And it's not just Canada, it's also the states and provinces, one level below the federal or senior levels of governments around the world. As Jason Kennedy says, the last quote there is, "We can't afford to lose a day when we need the money to be spent in the economy now." And they're moving, they're getting things done, but again, the challenge is to get the projects planned and through the regulatory process. Next slide. New Zealand, and Phil's going to talk a little bit about a particular example in New Zealand a little later, but again, New Zealand has been through this once already, and I won't steal Phil's thunder, but again, they're getting ready to launch some new projects, infrastructure projects. They have some great experience with collaborative and integrative techniques for doing this to get project certainty and outcome going. And they're adding new funding to an already massive $12 billion upgrade program that was announced late last year to drive their economy forward. So the next slide. So the question is, what's needed to solve the problem? government's coming forward with the money and the desire. Industry has the desire. So what lessons have we learned in the past in terms of what gets in the way of getting these projects launched and into the ground or being built, which in turn quickly resolves those large unemployment problems and brings our consumer back to stimulate our economies and get our economies going. So capital projects need to be identified. We need to have the advanced funding in place, and we need a streamlined permitting process and regulatory support. It's clear that government needs to do more than just making the money available. But identifying a project and having it designed are two different things. So if the project is identified and designed, great. If not, how can we fast track the design without some of the challenges that comes from fast tracking those designs? And likewise, not just with design of technical requirements of the project, how can we work with government and regulatory agencies to fast track the acceptance of these designs and plans so that the shovels can be put into the ground? What type of commercial contracts are we going to use so that we can proceed and deal with liabilities and risk and the public concerns and market concerns? Top right-hand corner, identifying and bringing key stakeholders together to make optimum decisions. From communities, the participants in the projects, the owners of the projects, regulators, how do we bring these people together to make efficient decisions in a timely basis? How do we help project professionals? We've been doing projects the same way for the last 50 years. How do we help them step out of a hierarchical top-down method of planning and delivering projects and move them into a highly collaborative process? And we're going to talk to you about that. And then finally, how do we engage the labor pools? We need labor leaders on side to ensure that the work rules are optimized. That's part of the problem. But we also have to ramp up new craft training and onboarding, and we need to bring millennials and the generations behind the millennials into the trades so that we have the human power to be able to do that. They work differently than we work, and we think, it's our belief, it's part of our research, is we think the younger generation is going to adopt these collaborative and integrated approaches to planning and executing projects. If you put all this together, what Phil is going to talk to you about in a second here is what is I2PD and how does I2PD as a delivery method pull these pieces together. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Phil and I'm going to let him have the floor. Over to you, Phil.
Thanks, Michael. Industrial Integrated Project Delivery, or I2PD. So we've defined that it's a delivery method that fundamentally enhances project collaboration and integration. I2PD is an outcome-focused delivery method incorporating high levels of collaboration and integration amongst the project participants, which include the owner, designer, and the contractor, and it relies on good structured communication. This delivery method is viewed as a relational type of contracting approach with appropriate sharing of risks amongst the project stakeholders. And we've defined it as by these 9 key principles that are intended to increase collaboration, integration, and structured communication, where trust among project participants is also enhanced. Through phase 1 of the research, which we reported on at the 2018 annual conference, it was found that these following 9 principles of relational contracts, such as commercial IPD in the healthcare industry and civil infrastructure project alliancing down under in Australia and New Zealand, make up these 9 principles of I2PD. In both cases, the objective of the relational contract is to create an environment of best for project decision-making and alignment of commercial interests by sharing risks through gain share, pain share incentives and multi-party agreements tying all the stakeholders together with one legal agreement. It was found commercial IPD, through phase one of the research, it was found commercial IPD has a heavy emphasis on the collaborative principles that promote good design optimization. And the civil infrastructure project alliancing has a heavy emphasis on the integration principles that promote good construction risk management. And since many industrial projects have a need for good design optimization and good construction risk management, industrial integrated project delivery, or I2PD, has a balanced emphasis of the 9 principles found in relational contracting. And then in addition to these 9 overarching principles, I2PD consists of 20 methods used to implement the I2PD projects with high degrees of collaboration and integration. So many of these methods are deployed on various types of projects, and they include, I'm sure, many methods that you're already familiar with within your organizations, like pull planning, collaborative front-end planning, and integrated technologies like 3D modeling, just to name a few of these. So just a little bit more background on I2PD. So what we're showing here with this diagram, it identifies the components and culture of the various different delivery methods. So here, design bid build utilizes bilateral transactional contracts to transfer project risks and creates more of a win-lose and best for me culture with a defined decision-making hierarchy. Design build and EPC have added some elements of more project collaboration integration, such as early involvement of key participants, partnering, team building, front-end planning, in some cases sharing of 3D models and even co-located offices. Whereas I2PD is now a progression to a completely collaborative integrated project delivery method, shifting from this transactional contracting approach to more of a relational contract, incorporating shared project risks and rewards in a more collaborative decision-making process, focused on what's best for the project as opposed to what's best for me. So this methodology uses the high levels of trust, collaboration, integration, and open communication with the aim at improving performance on the entire project, such as improved safety, earlier cost and schedule certainty, and better optimized designs. So now the question is, okay, what types of projects can I2PD deliver? So from phase one of our research, we surveyed 85 projects, and 85 projects were across all 5 of CII's industrial sectors. So they're all shown here on our slides. It was found after surveying of these 85 different projects across all the different sectors, it was found that project performance certainty increased amongst all the sectors with more use of collaboration and integration found in the I2PD delivery method. So this provided us with some good supporting evidence to suggest and demonstrate that all industrial sector projects are good candidates for an I2PD delivery. Now in phase 2, we're actually taking a deeper dive to better understand which projects may be better suited for I2PD type of delivery. So right now it's indicating projects showing high degrees of complexity with multiple stakeholders, high dollar revenue value in the project, and with a need for, and the project has a need for early cost and schedule certainty, seem to be the best fit for this project delivery. However, based on our phase 1 findings, it seems all projects can benefit from more collaboration and integration. So I2PD has shown to be a good method to produce outcome certainty on complex projects in dynamic environments is what we're seeing. So now just a little bit more detail of why I2PD in this environment. Well, many of the benefits of IPD, so the commercial integrated project delivery, described on this slide here, have been identified by previous studies conducted on delivery methods, or sometimes by professionals with experience with the delivery method. Now, the data has shown IPD projects see less changes, faster processing times, and significantly faster delivery times. Increased cost certainty, accelerated schedule, and improved quality have been identified by project participants of IPD as experienced benefits of the delivery method. Now, coming back to I2PD or industrial IPD, from phase 1 of our research, analyzing the 85 projects from the 5 CII industrial sectors, it was found projects using high degrees of collaboration and integration statistically significantly outperformed their counterparts in 6 out of the 12 common performance metrics used to measure success on industrial projects. The 6 performance metrics that outperformed within this collaborative integrated environment were lowest life cycle cost, another was speed to market, client satisfaction, early schedule certainty, early cost certainty, and quality. So the need for these specific performance outcomes seem to be heightened in this current market condition. So thus it seems this data suggests I2PD seems to be a good fit for the industrial and infrastructure projects during the economic recovery process following the pandemic. So now I just want to, Michael alluded to down under New Zealand. So we brought a case study. As a matter of fact, this case study was a foundational case study for our phase 1 delivery. Well, this is a specific example. This case study is an example of using this type of delivery, which is called a collaborative alliance, collaborative project or program alliance. They use this delivery method as a mechanism to rebuild after the wake of a serious disaster event. So in the context of recovering from a disaster. So this project or program is called the Stronger Christchurch Infrastructure Rebuild Team, or SCIRT project. And this is an example of a highly complex, large-scale project that used high amounts of structured integration, processes, and collaboration to turn a series of these disastrous events actually into what we feel is a good success story to share. Christchurch, so just a little backstory, Christchurch, New Zealand experienced 2 devastating earthquakes, one in 2010 and the other in 2011, which left the city crippled. A highly integrated alliance created with a contract value of its $2.2 billion New Zealand spread over a 5-year program to rebuild the city of Christchurch following these 2 disastrous earthquakes was set up in response. The SCIRT Alliance consisted of 3 public agencies and 5 private contracting firms, which were all tasked under this alliance with rebuilding the infrastructure of this devastated city over the course of 5 years as one project team sharing all resources, risk, and rewards. This alliance is an example of how using these high levels of collaboration and integration to overcome significant project complexities and uncertainties, and what we feel is the most telling performance metric following completion of the rebuild work in 2016 was found from the results of a survey issued to the residents of the city of Christchurch, which is the ultimate customer of the SCIRT Alliance. It found that 80% of the citizens of Christchurch were satisfied with the work performed within the Alliance, while only 25% of the citizens were satisfied with the work done outside the Alliance using traditional contracting methodology. So as Michael stated, New Zealand now is rolling out a $12 billion infrastructure program intended to stimulate the economy. And word from down under is most of this package will be delivered through alternative contracting methods, with much of this $12 billion of stimulus being delivered through project alliancing as part of the result of some of the success stories seen on previous projects. So with that, I'll turn it over to our Allison to discuss our I2PD case study that's currently underway right now.
Thank you. So as we've heard over and over again, the mantra for this style of contracting strategy is what's best for project. And it's not what's best for me or my organization, which is the typical behavior in the traditional contract designs. So the team members really have to kind of wrap their head around that, that it is project first. And inevitably they do, because of the contract structure and the 9 principles that are associated with it, and the methods and tools that you end up using during the project. So those methods and tools are really used to motivate the team towards a collaborative behavior. And this mindset is what drives the right overall decisions when you're developing and executing contracts. So if you click on the big room icon there, thank you. So during the validation phase for the Otto Holden turbine generator overhaul project, the team met for 3 to 4 days a week for about 8 weeks. So it was a lot of investment. But during those meetings, the team discussed risks, the risk pool, estimates, schedules, health and safety, warranty, and they talked about the collaboration and integration methods that they were going to use. The detailed scope was also discussed in this big room, and the team may add, remove, and even trade scope in an effort to optimize project deliverables and ensure that all work is truly value add for that project. The other good thing about the big room is that it can actually be run virtually. We didn't do it during the Otto Holden project because we were able to meet in person. But considering the COVID pandemic situation, big room can actually be run virtually. So it's a great tool. And getting together like this actually holds accountability to deliver. It's that positive peer pressure to keep things moving forward. You can click on the joint risk assessment one. Yeah. So Otto Holden, but you can use other formats. And eventually we did go to just an Excel format for ease of upkeep on our risks. And one of the risk items in the original scope of work for this particular project was a head cover being reused and machined for alignment. It was a very high risk item due to the concrete growth that's actually happening at this station and the potential for difficulty when aligning the unit and if it would stay aligned. So the team eventually changed the scope to include a new eccentric head cover that will allow for some concrete movement and improved realignment of the unit in the future. And we estimated an extension of about 5 years on the overall life of the unit by doing this. So having this collaborative time together, reviewing risks and working with 5 other parties, you can really come up with some great ideas. And the next one is the shared risk and reward model. Yeah. So the risk reward is developed by the I2PD core team, and the core team is comprised of 1 rep from each of the parties. And in our case for Otto Holden, there was a rep from an engineering firm, a general contractor, equipment designer and supplier, QA/QC, and the owner. And each representative must have authority and accountability to make decisions on behalf of their organization. That's very important, because these decisions need to be made quickly as a team rather than going back and forth into each other's organizations and getting approvals. It's not to say that all decisions are made by this core team, but we're really trying to make decision-making efficient and, again, best for the project. And the next one is on the multi-party agreement. So I2PD fast tracks the procurement phase since you only need a high-level scope document along with a draft I2PD table of contents. I call it the terms and conditions. And Otto Holden started in April of 2018 from a blank sheet of paper to a signed service agreement by September 2018. And this would normally take OPG about 12 to 14 months for a project of this size going down a traditional contracting method. The technical teams, the PIT teams is what we called them, is an integral part of the process, and they are involved in the development of the inputs to that multi-party agreement, scope, risk, costs, etc. And again, we utilize those big rooms to have everybody at the table. So if you go back to the original slide. So you can see coming out of all of these different tools that we used, we had 3 different areas that or end results. So the RFP submission required each proponent to provide traditional fixed price cost estimates. And during the Otto Holden validation phase, the core team was able to reduce the overall estimated price by 32%. The change was a result of redistribution of scope of work to the party that would be the most efficient at taking it on, such as number of supervisors and technical directors, setting clear roles and responsibilities, and reducing redundant activities. And during the Otto Holden pre-construction phase, machining was being subcontracted out and it had a markup on it. The project team asked OPG to look at internal machine shops based on the cost comparisons. It just made sense for OPG to take on this work and reduce the overall costs for the projects. So savings were found once all of the participants had this shared agreement with known and shared underlying assumptions. On the schedule side of things, you can see we improved by 36% from the RFP. The execution baseline schedule was reduced from 14 months to 9. There was a project controls pit team, and they worked closely with the other pit teams to go over the schedule and refine the work activities. This change in outage time is approximate. The change in our outage time, it's about 3.75 million in revenue per unit for OPG times 8 units. So about $30 million over the 8 years of the project is what OPG would see. 4 major vendors are basically putting 100% of their profits at risk, and they're doing this willingly because they have cost and schedule certainty with the collaborative upfront planning and transparency. And just another note of a benefit that isn't really on this slide, but all our issued for construction drawings are complete prior to going into this unit outage, which is really rare for us in the overhauls. And our PDRI score was 186, which is the best score we've actually had for overhauls. So this score can be attributed to that strong front-end planning, a lot of investment up front, slightly higher upfront cost associated with it, but we've got a solid plan, and you can see where we're really saving on schedule and overall cost. You can move to the next slide. Thank you. So really, certainty. The I2PD contracting strategy involves parties sooner, so we can develop a solid plan together. The protection side of it, this type of planning ensures you know exactly how many resources for how long of time, and you're protected with that cost and schedule certainty. On the incentives and collaboration, the incentives motivate proponents to be creative, to drive down cost and share in the savings. Collaboration really naturally occurs because there's no hierarchy in this strategy or in this contracting method. And also other team members, they voluntarily step in if one party is failing, since they share the same profit and the risk pools. So if one party is failing, all of them are failing. And this model provides collaboration and being at the table together to ensure success. And that behavior really provides that certainty of success. So next up is Michael to summarize the overall presentation.
Thanks, Allison, and thanks, Phil. So this is the fun part. You know, in an hour, or not even an hour, in half an hour between Phil and Allison, they've described to you what I2PD is and the success that we've seen on the Otto Holden project. So I'm going to try and summarize that from the perspective of hundreds of other projects, if not thousands of projects on a global scale, that will be brought to the market quickly and have opportunities in planning and execution, if done right, to deliver not only the assets themselves, but to deliver them with cost, schedule, and quality certainty. So, you know, it's not a guess, it's not a promise, it's a reality. Governments are going to spend massive amount of money over the next 12 to 24 months stimulating their economy. And that's because we shut those economies down in our health responses to COVID-19. And what we've seen is a significant impact on our economy. So it's coming. And the question is, how do we participate as an industry? And how do we participate in a responsible way so that the dollars that are entrusted to us are spent well and done well? So what we've seen in our research, phase 1 research, what we're seeing again in this phase 2 research that the CII is involved in, what we've seen in the Otto Holden example and the Christchurch example and other alliancing and commercial IPD examples is speed increases through procurement, through design, and through construction. But that speed increase doesn't come at a cost of certainty of outcome. right? So by aligning risk and rewards, by engaging organizations and individuals in collaborative and integrated teams, so everybody's seeing the same information at the same time. In particular, I like what Allison said earlier, so that we're not incented to let people fail, but we're incented to catch them before they fail. That projects can be executed with more certainty. So, you know, in summary, and then we've got about 15 minutes for questions here. I2PD delivers faster designs, integrated and accelerated execution, improved cost certainty, and improved schedule certainty. And so with that, Mike Pappas, I'll turn it back to you for questions and answers.
Okay, thanks a lot, team. Really appreciate that presentation. I have a couple questions about the procurement and contracting. So in a typical project, for example, a petrochemical project, there are a number of key stakeholders. In the I2PD method, is it envisaged that all of the primary stakeholders need to sign a common contract? Would this not be voluminous work for all the stakeholders and substantial time to be spent in the front end getting that contract together?
I'll start, Allison, and then maybe you can jump in based on OPG's experience. So I don't think it takes longer. I actually think from an owner's point of view, it takes less, because you're not negotiating 5 unique or 6 unique or 11 unique contracts. You're negotiating one contract. And the experience that we found is the participants that are selected tend to work with each other, and you cut through the negotiating items quicker because you see multiple points, you see multiple viewpoints. And what we found in particular is that contractors in general and the engineering company bring a level of expertise to the contract formation that owners typically don't have. Or if they have it from an adversarial point of view. So I think it's the exact opposite, Mike. I think it actually accelerates the development of the contracting strategy across the whole project than if we do it on a bilateral approach. Allison, you want to add to that?
Yes, I would definitely echo that. You know, the first time around for us, and this was Otto Holden, of course, was a bit of a stumble because it's new, and it was a bit of a stumble for our vendors too because it's new. But once we got down to it, I think it moved quite quickly, getting it agreed to and signed. Yeah, to me, you're not going through 5 RFPs, 5 contracts. You're going through one, and you're working together to sign off on one contract.
And from a planning and execution point of view, you only have one contract to refer to, and everybody's referring to that same contract.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, great, thanks. What is the basis of contractor selection and qualifying in I2PD? Allison, you're smiling.
I am smiling because it was quite different. I'm trying to recall back to some of the criteria that we had actually put on that scorecard, but a lot of it was about collaboration and their openness to having transparent books, right? That everybody was going to be able to see the costs. So it was a lot about more of the softer skills than what you would normally have in your criteria on a scorecard. It wasn't solely based on price and meeting a spec. So Mike, I will let you talk because you've got way more expertise on this.
Sure, and then I'm going to ask Phil to jump in. So that was a question that we asked ourselves as a research team in the phase 1. You know, what makes a good supplier for this type of delivery method? As a matter of fact, what makes a good owner? And we put a maturity model together, and we put a very sophisticated tool that we then used as the basis of developing our scorecards. But probably the first step, and probably a good positive lesson learned, is in talking to commercial IPD project planning and execution people and a lot of the alliancing people. One of the lessons we learned is that when you're going down this path, when you're starting this path, and we're all subject to competitive rules and regulation, is pick known vendors for the first one. Pick vendors where you know their reputation, you know their people, they know your people. We looked at vendors that have worked together before. And so what we ended up on the Autoholder project, we ended up with 4 vendors in each of the categories, I think except construction, where we had 5. And we reached out to them and we said, and they all had existing MSA arrangements with OPG, and we reached out to them and put them through an expressions of interest exercise to see if they'd be interested. We weren't sure. We weren't sure if any of them would be willing to participate and take the risk. Not one of them backed out. All 17 said, hey, we'd be interested in doing this. And by the way, we have some experience with pieces and parts of this. The vendor selection is, let me say it another way. Vendors, suppliers, want as much schedule and cost certainty as owners do. Phil, maybe you want to talk about the maturity model and how that kind of helped shape our selection?
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Yeah, through phase 1, we developed an organizational maturity model that each of the different organizations could complete. It's a self-assessment is what the organizational maturity model is. Self-assess their ability to deliver an I2PD project with the various different methods, implementation methods, as well as the principles, how equipped they are to deliver that. So they were able to perform self-assessment on their organization prior to stepping into the project. So they were aware of where their capabilities were, as well as OPG had done a self-assessment as well to understand where their strengths and weaknesses were. And I think that was quite beneficial for the organizations that were stepping into it. So they were aware of what they were stepping into, as well as for OPG to understand where they were and their various different vendors were, and matching that marriage, if you will, with the various different companies, and not just with OPG, but also amongst themselves. That project has signed a multi-party agreement with 5 major stakeholders, and if memory serves me correctly, one of the important questions that was asked from each of the various different vendors was, what are you looking for in a potential partner? Not just OPG, but your other partners that you're going to be working side by side, and make sure that they had a chance to communicate as everyone's tying together, linking themselves to the single agreement. Want to make sure everybody was open on what they were looking for, what the designer was looking for, and the contractor designer, and the supplier was interested in from a contractor perspective. And I think that stimulated a lot of good dialogue as well through the procurement process to find that right fit of those 5 stakeholders that were going to work really well together to deliver the project. Yeah.
Okay, we have a lot of good questions that have come in. Thanks. The core team is made up of senior executives from each company. How many I2PD projects can a set of senior executives handle at one time?
So let me just talk about the organization structure of an I2PD project. There's really, try not to think of this hierarchical, but there's really 3 layers. There's the I2P team, the people that are doing the work and planning the work. They work hand in glove with a core team, which is a representative from each company. And during the validation phase and the planning phases, it's not full-time for the core team. In this particular project, it represented something, depending on the role and which particular piece they're working on, anywhere from, I'd say, 20% out of a man month to maybe as much as 50% of a man month, particularly as we're bringing the construction estimate and the construction schedule to close. So it's not full-time, 20% to 40% on this project. Bigger projects may take more. And then the senior executive team, their obligation was to stay aware of the project, to be there just in case there was issues. And so they met, other than the kickoffs, which they participated in, they met monthly for an hour, 2 hours at most. Allison, you want to add to that?
Yeah, that's it. It's executive team is once a month. We get a scorecard that comes through from the team coming out of the systems that they're using. So I don't think it's overly complex to be able to summarize that scorecard on a monthly basis. We have a rep that comes in. They rotate it amongst the core team right now to present the scorecard to us and give their view of it and of what's happening inside the team. So no, it's not overly cumbersome. Maybe at the beginning a little bit for that core team to try and rally the troops at the very start. But after that, it's mainly the team itself that's leading it collaboratively, which is probably the best thing, is you've got them all at the table.
Yeah, and I think that the amount of work is significantly less than they would have in a traditional project, just because of the way they work together and the means and methods. It's not there's an engineering company, but there's 3 companies that have engineers in the various engineering pit teams, and they work as a team. They don't work in silos. Construction has 3 or 4 participants involved in the construction planning. And so when it moves up to the core group, who are providing what I'll call, I don't want to say command and control, but organizational support and decision-making support on the project, there's not a lot for them to do because the teams underneath them have done a good job in general.
Okay, thanks. We have a couple different questions about, is there an I2PD contract template or are other templates used?
So yes, there is. There is, and thank you to the research participants. So we brought together different commercial templates for commercial IPD, alliancing. OPG had just finished off a brand new EPC template. And so as part of putting the first project together, we developed a multi-party agreement that is used by OPG and on this particular project, and we turned it into a generic template that's up on CII and is available to CII. What we found is with the infrastructure and commercial IPD templates, they were too light. There wasn't enough meat there that you'd expect from an industrial project. So we needed the marrying of those templates in with the details that come out of a typical EPC contract. And so, not including schedules, the template that's been developed is about 90 pages, includes all the key areas. And I think the actual executed project with all the schedules and procurement schedules and delivery schedules and so on and so forth, I think all in is somewhere around 300 pages for 5 parties.
Okay, thank you. How do I2PD and AWP, advanced work packaging, relate to each other?
Today they don't in any organized manner. And so that's a question both AWP research and the I2PD research team have asked of each other. And a lot of the principles and methods that go on in the AWP approach to planning the work were used in this project. So I think there's an opportunity for both the I2PD team and the AWP team to learn from each other and integrate those 2 lines of research.
Yeah, I agree. I2PD is primarily a project delivery contract strategy type of concept, and AWP is more of an execution strategy type of concept. So they're certainly not exclusive,
No.
and they can certainly be used together. Great. I think we have time for one more. How do you calculate cost and schedule savings percentages with I2PD versus standard execution?
Well, that's a really insightful question. So when we were looking for a project, and we were working with OPG. We wanted something where they had a history of projects. So as Allison will tell you, OPG regularly does hydroelectric station overhauls. I forget how many stations you have. I think 70 or 90 stations that were all built in the 30s.
In our region, yeah.
Yeah, just in your region, not across the province.
Just kidding.
They were
No.
built in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, right? So they're all going through their first, second, or third renovation. So we wanted to pick a stream of projects where we had good historical data. So that's the first question. So we know what it cost to do them before, and we know which methods were used before. And then at the same time the Otto Holden project is going on, there's another overhaul project of similar nature time being delivered with a different delivery method that is used as a control project. So part of Phil's job and his research team is to take a look at the performance metrics, and we've developed a very detailed set of metrics that I'll let Phil talk to that help us answer that very question, because we want the answer to that question. Phil, maybe you want to add to that?
Yeah, we developed a performance metric framework and some, but we've identified as key result areas that most companies in the industrial sector would use to define either success on their project or a not as successful project. And from there, we developed key performance indicators within each of those result areas that can specifically measure those outcomes consistently from one project to the next. So from the OPG having an integrated I2PD project that Allison and team are running, we can compare it to another project within OPG that they're doing that's comparable with those same consistent KRAs and KPIs, as well as partnered with the CII's benchmarking program. And so we can compare it consistently. We've aligned those metrics consistently back with the CII benchmarking program, so that can be compared against a larger data set to consistently measure that across projects.
Let me just add one more thing. It might be of interest to this particular audience. As those 11 KRAs with all the secondary KPIs were being developed, Phil and his research team worked hand in glove with CII and Deborah Gazelle and the new benchmarking project, so that as we develop and as we plan and execute more and more of these I2PD projects, and the data that comes out of that from the phase 2 research, we'll be able to load that seamlessly into the new CII benchmarking database.
Thank you, Michael.
Oh, sorry, I got a phone call at the same time there. Okay, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate your time, and we hope you enjoyed the webinar. Special thanks to Phil, Allison, and Michael for the presentation. Don't forget to check out our events page to sign up for future webinars. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Jenny, in the background. Phil, Allison, it was great working with you.
Hey, I'm happy to come off mute and yell at Mike Pappas anytime. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye now.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.